virtual classroom. So this is our first math lesson together, and what you'll be needing is a pencil and an eraser, so make sure at least one of your pencils has an eraser, a pair of scissors, a blank white piece of paper, we'll be using this later on, and you'll need something to write on. Now, I prefer that you use a notebook and not just loose leaf paper, because when we come back to school in 6 weeks, I want to be able to see everything that you did clearly in your book. Now, first thing I want you to do is head up, so you can pause the video right here and copy your date, topic, and learning intention. We're learning today about fractions, decimals, and percentages. Specifically, we're going to identify the relationship between significant or important fractions, decimals, and percentages. Alrighty, so at this point, go ahead, put your notebook down, and you're just going to pay close attention. So our learning intention said we're looking at the relationship between significant fractions like a quarter, a half, and 3/4. We're looking at their relationship to decimals and percentages. Now, I'm sure quite a few of you have not yet heard about percentages. You should be a little bit familiar with decimals from our work with money, but perhaps you haven't delved too deep into it yet. So what we're going to look at today is just memorizing the relationship between these three fractions and their equivalent pairs of decimals and percentages. So let's look at a half first, because that's the easiest one. To be able to come up with a decimal and a percentage, instead of thinking of this as two pieces and we take one, we're going to think of our whole as being made up of 100 pieces. Now you might go, why? Well, because 100 is an easy number to use and it's so commonly used. Think about money. 100 cents make $1. 100 comes up a lot in math. So for that reason, it's the basis of decimals and percentages. So I took 100 square and I split it in half. Since I split it in half, how many pieces are on each side? Well, 50. 50 plus 50 makes 100. This is all I need to know to come up with a decimal and a percentage. Take a look at how you write the decimal for a half. 0.5. Or you could even write 0.50, and there's our 50. And guess what? The percentage is 50%. Now, I'm sure some of you have seen me put the percentage sign like this on your work before. Hopefully you haven't been getting 50%, but you would have seen this. And that just means that's how much you got correct. Notice the percentage sign is like something over something, not a coincidence. Something over something. This little sign here is showing us that there's a relationship here between this and this. It's part of a whole. In this case, 50 parts out of 100. And 50 parts out of 100 is the same thing as a half. Now, let's take a look at a quarter. A quarter is just half of a half. I've taken another 100 square and I split it in half down the middle like I did the last one, and then I split it in half again, so I have 4 equal pieces, quarters. How many little squares are in each section, in each quarter? Well, if you did 5 by 5, you'd figure out very quickly that it's 25 pieces. 25 plus 25 plus 25 plus 25 makes 100, as we know from using quarters. So a quarter of 100 is 25. That's all I need to know to write my decimal. 0.25. And my percentage, I'm sure as you can guess already, 25%. Again, our little percentage sign, 25 out of 100. 50 out of 100. Our last significant fraction is 3/4. We know what a quarter is. We know what a half is. I'm going to give you a second to see if you can figure out what 3/4 would be. Perhaps you multiplied this by 3. Perhaps you added this and this together, because a half is the same as 2/4. 2 plus 1 gives me 3. Well, if I take back out my little 100 square and I look for 3 sections, I've got 25 plus 25 plus 25. How much is that? 0.75. So my decimal is 0.75. And my percentage, 75%. 75 out of 100. Now, these percentages and decimals and fractions are probably the most popularly used. I'm not saying that they're the only ones. They are definitely not the only decimals and percentages out there, but these are the ones we're going to start with. And in just a moment, I'm going to have you set up a little activity to help you memorize these, because the best way to learn these is just like your times tables, just commit them to memory. It doesn't make sense to try and work it out every single time. So that's what we're going to do now. All right. So now that we've seen the relationship between fractions, decimals, and percentages, what you're going to do in your notebook underneath your learning intention is create a table just like this. You can go ahead and pause the video so that you can get this set up, and then you can follow along with me. Now I'm going to work through it the same way I did a moment ago, just to kind of reinforce it. Starting with a half. Half of 100. Remember, when we do decimals and percentages, we think of the whole as being made up of 100, just like 100 square. So half of 100 is 50. So the decimal I'm going to write is 0.50. There's my 50. My percentage is just 50%. It takes two 50s to make 100. 0.5, well, 0.5 plus 0.5 makes one whole. So then that's how I see that it's still a half. Now for a quarter. A quarter is just half of a half. So I can split this, or these, in two. 0.25, 25%. Next, 3/4. I could just triple this, or I could add these two together, and I'll get 0.75, or 75%. Do you see a pattern? 25, 50, 75. Well, what's one whole going to be? There is a pattern going here. If I get a whole, that means I have the entire thing. So far under my decimals, I've been working with a number less than 1. If I have a whole, that means I have the entire thing. So I have one whole, 1.0. Or you could just write 1. You don't have to put the decimal point there. If I have a whole in percentages, that means I have all 100 pieces. Here I had 25, 50, 75. Now I have 100, 100%. Hopefully this is what you've been seeing on all your test papers, and not that. So 100% means everything is included. We're going to turn these into little flashcards now. So this is where your white piece of paper is going to come in handy. And you're going to be needing a pair of scissors. So off camera, I just folded my paper into 8 equal parts. I'm going to show you how I did that. First thing I did was I took the paper and I folded it hot dog style, like that. And then while it was still folded hot dog style, I folded it hamburger style. So I split it down the middle. Mine's going so easy because I folded it already. You can pause this if you need to catch up. Then when I folded it hamburger style, I folded it hamburger style one more time. So, let me try and do this with one hand. Folded it like that. If I could use both my hands, it would be a whole lot neater. But that's essentially what you want, so that when you open it up, you're going to have 8 equal sections. What we're going to do on this is transfer our fractions going down one side and our decimal and percentage on the other side. And then we're going to cut them out to make it like a matching sort so that you can shuffle them up and then practice matching them. So get out your pencil, and going down, let's just write our fractions nice and big. Don't make them too tiny. I'm going to start with a quarter, a half, 3/4, and then at the bottom, instead of writing 1/1, because I think that's ridiculous, I'm just going to write 1 whole because, I mean, what's the point of writing 1/1? It's the exact same thing. So I've got my fractions going down one side, and on the other side, I'm going to write the matching decimal and percentage. So a quarter is the same thing as 0.25. You can just look back at your table if you want to skip ahead of me. And 0.25 is the same thing as 25%. A half, 0.50, or just 0.5, 50%. 3/4, 0.75, 75%. And finally, 1 whole is just 1. I'm going to put 1.0 so that we see our little decimal there. And that's the same as 100%, not 1%. That's very important because remember, with a percentage, you're thinking of the whole as being made up of 100 pieces. So it's 100% down here. Then you're going to take your scissors and simply cut along the lines that were formed when we folded. Then you're going to have some cards to shuffle. So here are my cards all cut out. I actually made these ones earlier, so they look a little bit different, but same stuff on them. I can now shuffle these all up and then practice matching them. I have a quarter here. Well, what's the same as a quarter? I gotta dig for it. I know that's 0.25, so I gotta find it. Oh my goodness, did I make it? Is it here? Did I forget 0.25? Ah, I think I found it. Here it is. A quarter is the same as 0.25, so I'll match these two together. Boom. Then 0.5 is the same, and 50% is the same as a half. Matched it. 1 is the same as 100%, and 0.75 is the same as 3/4. What I want you guys to do with these cards is just continually practice them. On your schedule it says that, I can't remember what time of day it is, but you're supposed to do your times tables practice and fraction drills. This is what I meant by fraction drills. I want you to practice just reinforcing this and make sure you memorize the relationship between these because it really is going to come in handy. Finally, here is your independent work. I want you to color in the percentage or decimal that's given along here. So for A, I asked you to color in 25% of these 4 circles. Can you figure out how many you should be coloring in? Well, try converting this to a fraction. 25% according to our table is the same as 1 out of 4. Did I just give you the answer? Maybe I did. Next one, you're doing 0.5 of these. Well, look at your table, find what 0.5 is. Then you're going to color 75% of these. And then finally, this one is a little bit trickier because you have to do a little bit of equivalence. You're going to color in 0.75 of these. When you've done that, I want you to take a picture of this and email it to me, please. You guys have my email address. I'm not going to say it right here. If you don't have my email address for some reason, tell your parents to WhatsApp me and I'll send them my email address again. All right, you guys, stay safe, you get your work done, and I'll be seeing you soon.